to me, the most talented and most impactful leaders are those who are the most self-aware. I don't care where you went to school. I don't care your pedigree. I care about your level of self-awareness. So those two things, super important. Really huge red flag when someone says, well, when I was at, and it's a huge kind of organization, insert whatever mega enterprise you want there. Well, we did it this way. And I'm like, yeah, that's super cool. Very impressive. I love that experience for you, but it needs to be applicable to our reality. And there's art really in knowing how to apply that and where to get curious. So to me, I think curiosity is the most important thing.
Hello, and welcome to our Unicorn Leadership Podcast.
Hello.
We're officially kicking off season 2. Ali, I'm excited to have you here.
I am equally excited.
This is going to be awesome. Ali, this is the podcast where we interview startup leaders, whether they're CPOs or CEOs or founders, about how to build high-performing teams and high-performing cultures. So we're going to ask Ali all about her stories, her journey, some tools, like specifics, some mistakes. I love when we get into where did we mess up? And so that our audience and our leaders that are listening to this and our founders can learn from it. The podcast is brought to you by Unicorn Labs. I'm Fahd Alhattab, the founder of Unicorn Labs, also the host of this fun podcast. And you can learn more about us at unicornlabs.ca, where we will host the podcast, but it is available everywhere. So today's guest is Ali Farrell. All right. So Ali, you've led a lot. You've led teams.
Done some things.
You've done some things. You've led teams at different scales, almost at different areas of every growth stage. So you did some work in corporate. You did some work in startups. Now you're a CPO of a much kind of more mature and growing, company. So this is all really exciting. You're 3 times Chief People Officer, and you're currently the CPO at Apprentice. Tell me a little bit about Apprentice.
Yeah, so Apprentice is a cloud-based manufacturing execution software and really digital transformation platform. And so most of our clients are in the pharmaceutical and cell and gene therapy space. And really our mission is to produce a large portion of the world's therapeutics. And so we're really super mission driven as an organization, and we're doing some pretty cool stuff. So a lot of exciting things coming up on our roadmap.
I feel like your CMO would be really happy with that pitch right there. Like you just nailed it. Like that was crisp. So you've come, to Apprentice with a lot of different experiences, leading teams, building strategies for people, from fast growing startups to larger companies, major restructuring. You've had to challenge some outdated leadership practices. You've been building people's strategies that actually work, right? And so kind of challenging some of the old, outdated, or stuff that just doesn't work, but we still do. There's a lot of we've always done this in HR, or we've always done this in people management. And I hear that you thrive in the middle of change, that you like chaos, that you might even refer to yourself as the chaos whisperer.
That is one of my special talents. I do tend to run a little bit towards the fire, so I think I can bring order to it. It is kind of a cycle I find myself in for one reason or another. Yeah.
So this episode, we're going to really unpack what it really takes to build and scale a team to the top. And we're going to talk about the difference between the Davids and the Goliaths, the difference between the corporate HR and the Davids, and how these small but mighty teams really grow. So without further ado, Ali, I want you to introduce yourself to our audience. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Where are you calling in from? Where'd you go to school?
Sure.
Where'd you grow up? I'd like to know a little bit more.
Yeah, so I grew up in upstate New York in a really, really tiny town called Frankfurt, which nobody knows about by any means, but it was a really good place to grow up for that reason. But I ended up going to college at Marist, which is in Poughkeepsie, New York. I thought I would be a journalist. I thought I would be a lawyer. I thought I would be so many things. And I have kind of ended up in HR for a lot of different reasons. But it's actually a path that makes a lot of sense given all of the things I thought I would be doing in my life. So today I live in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. My career trajectory has been a little unusual, I think, for a chief people officer, because I have large publicly traded company experience. I've got PE-backed experience. I have bootstrapped SaaS startup experience, which was really amazing. And I also have high growth VC-backed experience. So I've kind of done a lot of different things. And it's not often, I think, you find a CPO who finds success in each of those different operating models.
Yeah, and actually, it's interesting. That actually interests me. I might pick on a little bit of that. I want to sort of understand how the philosophy changes from a bootstrap startup to a VC back to a PE
Yeah.
back, right? Oftentimes we, as founders are sort of sometimes applying a single solution, right? Or you have your HR folks who go and go, well, this worked here at this big
Oh,
corporate that I worked. Let's apply this here. And you're like, not the same. But trying to understand what the difference is and what the strategies are is going to be key. So I'm looking forward to that. So Ali, you told me you've had a winding career, a little few different things. You wanted to be a journalist. This is your moment as a journalist, Ali.
honestly, I thought I would be a journalist. I love interviewing people. I like talking to people. I like digging into things. I'm super curious. And so really in this job, not only do I get to do this and hang out with you all, but I get to talk to different people every day and learn different things. And so it makes a lot of sense. Like the things I learned
Yes.
in school and things I learned in my internships and all of that, really I use today, honest to God. It's crazy how it all works out, really.
That's awesome. You're still
Yeah.
gathering all the stories. So
Oh, yes.
what was the first job out of university, and then what was the first pivot into HR? Do you remember those?
Yes, I do. So my first job, I always had multiple jobs, but my first job out of university, I was a TV news producer at my local TV station in upstate New York. So that was my first job out of college. I was a news producer.
Yeah.
Then
And
I did a
then
little copywriting
okay.
as well.
Okay.
Did a little
That's fun.
copywriting.
And what
Yep.
was the pivot into HR? What was the pivot
Yeah.
into that world?
Yeah, so I was a copywriter at a really super small agency in the Philadelphia suburbs, and I ended up leaving there and going to a company at the time that was called Avenue A Razorfish. So it was an advertising agency based in Philadelphia. I was really doing outbound selling SEO, and I hated it. I was like, this is soul sucking for so many reasons. And there just so happened to be a recruiting coordinator job open at Avenue A. And I moved into that. And that was kind of where I started. And that was really where my love for this function took off. And it was a company I loved, and I ended up being there for almost 10 years. So I grew really quickly. So that was my first entrance into HR was through recruiting
So your
coordination.
first entrance, how would you describe that company? Were they
Oh,
larger? Were they startup? Were they like, what would you classify them under? Sort of, you got your chops under what category of work?
I would call it corporate. So Avenue A was part of a large corporate organization called Aquantive. And Aquantive was actually acquired some point in my tenure by Microsoft. Microsoft kind of acquired us, separated us for parts, kept the ad tech platform, sold off the advertising agencies to Publicis. So that I would consider large corporate company experience, but advertising.
Yeah. So let's talk about the lessons from corporate. So
Yeah.
those are some of the first lessons. What works in HR in corporate? So if I'm in a bigger company, I'm doing some HR, what are some of the stuff that you're like, hey, this stuff works here. We did
Yes.
well. We had some successes. And I'm sort of maybe foreshadowing to, did you try and apply some of those to when you started transitioning, and where were the challenges?
Yeah.
So what worked at the corporate HR level?
Yeah. So there are so many challenges going from a big corporate. One of the greatest challenges comes down to unlearning. So when you move from a big corporate environment as a leader, you have to unlearn a lot of things. There's so much. It's like plenty. You have resources, you have processes, you have programs, there's SMEs, you have corporate functions who just focus on one thing in a really powerful way. And they move a lot slower, for sure. There's less ambiguity in roles and in levels. And it's so rare in that kind of organization where you find somebody wearing multidisciplinary hats. It's like there are jobs, there are people, there are resources. Almost all of that gets stripped away when you go to a startup.
Yeah.
That's it, right? And you can take some of what you learn from like a best practice conceptual perspective, but you have to build from scratch when you're at a startup, and you have to work at so many different altitudes. I've been a builder, an ideator, an operator. I've had to in the morning be a really strategic business partner and talk about strategy, but in the afternoon, I'm like rolling up my sleeves and sourcing candidates. Like you're just at these different altitudes. And I think that is really energizing. And I really, really love that. But it is very different. When you come from corporate and you go to a startup, you really need to be mindful about showing a little bit of restraint and resisting the urge to just copy and paste. So I've always been very mindful of this, largely because I think it's so presumptuous to think that what you did in a huge organization or what you achieved is going to work somewhere else. And I think it gives leaders kind of an excuse not to get curious and be a little bit lazy.
Yeah, yeah. So actually, I wanted to dig in that, Ali. So what are some of the mistakes here that happen often where an HR person coming from corporate might be trying to copy paste something over, or a founder who isn't sure what to expect either is sort of, I would say when they hire their first VP of sales, when they hire their first COO, right? Like often founders are making mistakes because they're first time building their company. They don't know what to expect of the role. So they let the new HR person lead, which is great. But if that HR person is sort of copy pasting from corporate, then we're leading them down a more rigid path.
If you are a new founder, a new CEO, a first time CEO, or really any CEO, I do think it's hugely beneficial to find yourself two different types of coaches. One who has built and been there before, who can be a sounding board for you externally, unrelated, right? And I think
that's not a plug. That's not a plug to Unicorn Labs, guys. That's just, she said it. I didn't tell her to say it.
I really didn't. But I think it's so important to have a very neutral sounding board, somebody who's been there, done that, to be kind of like a Sherpa for you. I think that's really important. I think the other really important resource to have early on is a personal executive coach for you, one who can guide you on your path to self-awareness. To me, the most talented and most impactful leaders are those who are the most self-aware. I don't care where you went to school. I don't care your pedigree. I care about your level of self-awareness. So those two things, super important. Where I've seen it, this notion of like copy and paste, right? Coming from where you were somewhere large to going to somewhere very small. Everyone's susceptible to it. HR people, leaders, new hires, all of that. Really huge red flag when someone says, well, when I was at, and it's a huge kind of organization, insert whatever mega enterprise you want there. Well, we did it this way. And I'm like, yeah, that's super cool. Very impressive. I love that experience for you, but it needs to be applicable to our reality. And I think curiosity is the most important thing. When you are starting at a startup, regardless of what your experience, you just have to be a sponge. You have to ask more questions. Then, you have to listen more and ask more than share. I think that's really important. And I think you have to be really focused on building a scalable and intentional foundation, and what worked somewhere else isn't going to work there.
So one of the things that you're saying here, Ali, that I'd love to just focus on for a moment is that an HR person in a startup cannot be solely an HR person. They have to understand the business. They have to be a business partner. They have to understand where the revenue comes from, how we grow, what the product is, that there's a real ownership. If you want to be at the decision-making table, and in a startup, you kind of have to be, and you're forced to be, then you've got to be able to actually have those conversations and go beyond just your lane, but have depth and have breadth actually in understanding. Now, one of the challenges I see, and maybe you can comment on it, is like, so an HR person comes in to a startup, and the startup is chaos, because like startups are chaos, right? Like there's no process for this. This is done through a random spreadsheet. I can't find the file for this. And they go, oh my God, we need to build some processes into this team. And they over-index the other way. So you need processes, but they over-index with this like extreme rigid, we're going to build a process for everything. But because of the pace and growth of a startup, the processes become outdated, which is often why startups struggle with this process. This is the sort of tension between the explore and the exploit, is that if you over-process something too early without knowing what the right process is, you over-process into the wrong way. I would say you can be more efficient, but you could efficiently do the wrong thing.
Right. Well, that's the chaos piece, right? I do think I have this innate ability to identify what is noise and what is music, right? There are different ways of thinking about that. And chaos can actually be a competitive advantage if it doesn't turn into panic. So that's really important. When I think about being a chaos whisperer, to me, it's not about eliminating chaos. Like that's part of the fun. Say it's my job how to know and how to operate within it, but then how to bring other people along and to turn some of that into momentum. And like you were saying, sometimes process is too much. So for me, operating kind of at an early stage, it's bringing just enough. It's not about perfection. It's not about robustness. It's not about being inflexible, and it is about just enough. It's knowing so much about the business to bring just enough process and just enough policy and just enough structure. It's about creating just enough so people aren't paralyzed. And I think that one of the ways I do this is by imagining the company that I'm at as a living, breathing thing. It's a system, right? And this is one of the things my coach taught me is like this place, it is a living, breathing system. If it could speak, what would it tell you it needed right now? And I promise you, there is almost no high growth startup that's like, I need a lot of process. I need a lot of like tools. I would be shocked if that was what the system said very early on.
Yes. Yeah. And this is part of the challenge, right? So when we're talking to startup CEO, they're trying to figure out, I think, as you said, what is enough? What is the right balance? How much do I need? And it depends on their size, and it depends on where they are on their stage, for sure, right? What are some of the, lessons you've taken away as you've shifted from corporate to startup?
Yeah, for me, it's clarity. There's almost nothing more important when you're at a startup, when people are wearing multiple hats, than clarity. Like, startups require speed for sure. But speed without clarity is chaos. That's what creates chaos, right? And so clarity is critical. It's foundational. If new leadership teams are going to focus on one thing and one thing only, I'm going to say, let's really dive into clarity. And for me, that means over communicating the mission, the vision, the values, and the priorities. So put those up front every single day in every single way, make them public, make them accessible at any point in time early on. My hope is that every person within a high growth startup can list them, can say those words, list the critical KPIs, list the critical OKRs, like list them, put them up front always. It is worthwhile work to build a vision, to build values really early on and anchor to those. That helps with clarity, right? That's really important. Yeah. I think it's also about definitions. In my experience, really focusing on what good looks like and defining that is really important. Some HR people will come in, and I have done this. I have been like victim to this. And it's like, no, we got to measure performance. Like, I'm going to build these crazy competency models and we're going to do this like robust process and everyone hates you because it doesn't make sense, right? So like,
I love that you brought this up, Ali, because like, so we do leadership development Unicorn Labs, right? And the amount of times we have companies that are like, we just need to do a full competency study. I'm like, honestly, we've studied your startups. I could tell you what the top competencies you're looking for are. They probably shared across most companies of what high performers are. The studies have been done. Here's a report. Let's not spend 6 months identifying competencies. Please.
Like, I've done that. I have done that, but I have refined it again from the corporate to startup. Like,
yes,
but
because there's different competencies that's needed also from corporate to startup, at PE, at venture backed. And so, but again, it's funny because we can spend so much time on it and like doing a bit of it. And I always joke. I said, okay, we don't want you to do it, but if you want to do it, I have a consultant for you. But it's like hone in on what you're really looking for, and let's make it quick. Let's make it dirty. Let's find some key pieces. Now, you know what? Maybe that's an interesting discussion, Ali. What are some of the characteristics of the high performing teams, the small, nimble, the Davids that are different than some of what makes high performance at the Goliaths?
Yeah. So I think it's about I will always go back to curiosity. It's just something I value, and I think it's really important when you're building. So I think there's just an innate curiosity that is different from the Davids and the Goliaths. I think it's listening. I think it's default to velocity. I think there's a greater need to pivot confidently, to be like, okay, I tried this, like to know when to call it. There's like to be mindful of that kind of sunk cost bias that exists in humans. I think at a startup, you need to think 10 steps ahead. You need to, risk mitigate on the fly. You can't really be egotistical. It exists. So everyone has an ego that helps us survive, right? And I do think startup leaders and CEOs have pretty big egos, but like that's distracting. You've got to just get that in check.
I think it's key because it's sort of, I've talked about this before. It's like you need to be delusional enough to start.
Yes. Yeah. You need to believe your own stuff.
Because then you're not going to start. So I need just enough delusion for you to actually start, but not too much delusion that your ego gets in the way for you to be able to bring other people along.
That's a hard balance. And that is why you need people. You need a team. You need a village, external. But that is one of the things. Also, I think in a startup, you don't have all the data always at all. So you need to be really confident in decisioning without having all the data. And you need to be really cool with failing. That's important. Like you can't internalize failure. It's not, it's not a characteristic of you that you are a failure. It's like, hey, I tried this thing, it didn't work. And I think honest to God, one of the characteristics that I just crave in a startup is someone who takes an extreme level of ownership. In a startup, if I hear someone say to me or to somebody else, well, that's not my job, I cringe. It doesn't mean you should be in everyone else's business, but it might not be your job to do. But if there is a need, if there's an opportunity, if there's a gap, take it, internalize it, think about it, brainstorm about how to solve it. Like it's your job. Sorry, it's your job. I don't.
Yeah, every big problem in the business in a startup is your problem, and I think that's a key shift, and that's a big shift between the corporate and the startups, the Goliaths and the Davids. And actually, I don't know if you saw this, Ali, but I know in Canada we saw this a ton during the pandemic, because of remote work. We saw a large labor force go into the startup tech world, thinking it's fun. Thinking this is going to be exciting. And there was a real mismatch of expectations, skills, characteristics of people moving from corporate or government into startups and startups being willing to take talent because in 2020 and 2021, the talent market was really reversed here, right? Like employees were able to just demand what they wanted. There was a difficulty in getting the right talent, right? There was just such a talent competition. When it's sort of leveled out a little bit now, right? With kind of, and so I found that for a while there was a lot of the layoffs or the reorgs were about sort of, wait, we picked up individuals who don't have the characteristics of these small, nimble startups. And I think this is key for when people are hiring, to understand the difference in the people you need early on, who are your I think someone calls it your pirates and your bandits, your sort of scavengers, you're right, the ones that are just willing to dive in and just solve the problem, while the subject matter experts in corporate will go, well, that's not my problem, that's not my expertise. So if something's not my expertise, I don't engage.
Thinking about it, it's like, what do you mean? What if there's an opportunity you're missing? That is one of the competencies, or it's not even necessarily a competency. It could be a competency. It could be a value. To me, it is critical for hires at a startup to have the ability to think like an owner. When you're at a huge corporation and you've got shareholders and it happens so far above and outside of your day to day, like you don't think about it. You probably get a bonus regularly. You probably get cost of living adjustments. You're just like vibing. Like you're not really thinking about it. When you're a startup, you have to think like a business owner. It is so important. So to me, I am digging into that when I'm hiring. But I also think from a leadership and like a chief people perspective, it is my job, my team's job to give candidates a really realistic job preview, like a no BS, super realistic job preview. this is how I think it's going to feel working here. This is what we expect. These are some of the things that are hard. These are some of the things that are fun. Like, are you into this? Do you want this?
Yeah.
You think about this.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think
No,
that's
I
really
like
important.
that. Right. Like it's working for us is not going to be easy. So I tell
No,
people
but
all the
it's gonna
time.
be
It's going to
fun.
be
It's
fun.
gonna be
It's going to be fun.
impactful. You're gonna learn
You're
so
going to
many
have
things.
challenge.
It's gonna be hard.
It's going to be hard. It's not going to be easy. So don't
Not
think
gonna
you're
be
coming
easy.
here for an easy ride.
This isn't a
So
lifestyle kind of thing, oftentimes
yeah.
anyway. Yeah.
So but that's key. That's key, that startups need to own that message. And I think that
Yeah.
sometimes they're afraid to own that message early on in their hiring because they don't want to, they want to attract the right talent and they want to
Right.
attract good people. So they say things that they think the market
I
wants to
know.
hear,
I
right?
know.
But actually the ones you want are the ones that are like, no, I'm not really looking for the balance. I'm looking for like a
Right.
rocket ship that I can jump on, right? And
Right.
is this an
Right.
exciting rocket ship that I can build? I'm not saying they're gonna, work, 16-hour days. We always talk about intensity in the hour, not the amount of hours, right? But
Right.
that's
Yeah.
that's key. So let me shift you here for a moment, Ali. So in a startup and in the Explore side of the business, in the Davids, they, success is product market fit. Success is we got customers. Success is we're getting traction. MRR is growing, our ARR is growing, investors are giving us a bit more money. Like it's humming, it's going. As you
Yes.
start to grow out of the only measure of success being revenue, you start to look at additional measures of success, right? And some of our corporate HR that get plugged into our startups start
Yes.
to look at all of these different measures, right? We
Yeah.
look at employee engagement, we look
Yeah.
at performance, we look at it sounds like revenue per employee is good for startups, and at some level, you get diversity scores, you get just all of these different. There's like 12 different potential people metrics, and it
Sure.
becomes, as you said, it becomes noise, and the music
Right.
isn't clear. So,
Yes.
in your opinion, how should the C-suite look at measuring or understanding performance in their teams?
Yeah.
As they're growing between this startup to scale up?
I think there are ways you can do that at a company-wide level, and I think there are really simple ways to do that at a team level that don't feel so heavy. I think what you were just describing, I consider vanity metrics. Like, oh, employee net promoter score. Like, yes, I want to know that. I want to know that our team likes it so much here that they want to bring their colleagues. Like, that is literally one sprinkle in metrics that matter, in my humble opinion. I always ask it, but I'm not that interested in it, if I'm being really honest with you. So my preference is to get really curious about organizational health. So I read somewhere at some point years ago that organizational health is a competitive advantage, and it really is. And there are a million different inputs into organizational health. But for me, it really kind of creating a baseline and measuring things like structure, right? And its influence on someone's ability to work. So it's, does the structure support collaboration? Does it support communication? Is it actually ineffective in that way? I want to know whether people have autonomy in decision making. I want to know, when someone wants to do a good job, what challenges exist that limits their ability to do that? Like, they have the will and the skill, but they can't. Like, I want to know what that is. It's like clarity, curiosity, and restraint are so important when you're structuring a startup. So to me, that's the data I want. Like, I want it at an organizational level. I want it at a team level. I want heat maps. Like, I want that data because there's such insight to be gained and to build from. So I'm looking at organizational health. ENPS, like, cool, that's one of them, but that's not meaningful to me.
So when you mention organizational health, it reminds me of, the team dynamics assessment that we've developed over the years, which is sort of looking at, do you have psychological safety in the team? And we measured in these. Do you have empowerment? Are people actually being empowered to make decisions? How is conflict handled? Is leadership fluid, or is it the same people always leading, right? Is there a sense of meaning and purpose? We're sort of looking at these different pieces. But Ali, we still end up at surveys. We still end up at and this is the challenge.
You don't even need to.
Okay, so tell me, because here's the challenge. Okay, so I'm a CEO. My team's under 20. That's fine. I can get a pulse. My team is under 50. I start losing a little bit of the pulse. my team is 50 to 100, and you develop what we call CEO disease, which means bullshit filters upwards. Right? I
Right.
think it's
Everyone
Daniel
tells you what
Goleman,
you
right?
want to hear. Everything's
Correct,
amazing. You're
right?
great. Like,
Because
love
the
it.
individual contributor tells their manager, oh my God, we messed this up. This isn't working. The
Yeah.
manager tells their manager, oh, we messed something up, but like, it's okay. We're fixing
Like
it.
telephone.
That,
It's like the
yeah,
game of telephone. It's like BS telephone,
correct. And
kind
it
of.
just gets more
Yes.
positive. And then at the top, they're like, everything's working. We're on it. Like we're fixing everything.
No big deal.
And then 6 months in, you're not hitting metrics. You're the only thing you're looking at is revenue, customer churn. And you're like, what is going on? Why aren't we hitting these metrics that I'm looking at from a business perspective? So as the company grows, and I can't always just get the pulse from walking
Right.
around and being in some meetings.
Yeah. Well, especially in a remote world, right?
Especially in a remote world,
Yeah.
what are leadership teams doing or what do you think they can do to really get a sense of understanding, success?
So I have to say, I have a lot of empathy for CEOs and that in growth mode because of that. People are afraid of them. People are, the bigger you are, the more kind of like on this philosophical pedestal, CEOs, like they don't get the real, and they so desperately want it. And they're like, why isn't anyone talking to me? It's like, they're probably not going to. Like, so I do have a lot of empathy for that. But I do think there are ways that leaders, even at a functional level, can kind of measure the health and the strength of their teams, like you're saying, without really arduous surveys. And I think it's really kind of three things, right? So leaders have more at their disposal to check in frequently. Sure, you can do surveys, you can do reviews, you can do skip levels. I think having conversations and when you are together, really using that time meaningfully makes a big difference. But I also think you have the great skill of observation as a human being. And so surveys are really heavy, but it's about getting that awareness. And if I am a leader in a team that is scaling and my team's getting a little bit bigger, I really want to understand a couple things. I want to measure and observe trust and truth. So does your team feel comfortable telling you the truth, even when they know you are not going to like it? You'll know if they are, because you will find out something that you wish you knew earlier. You will find it out very late. You will find it out when you don't have time to impact it positively. So that is your cue to build a safe place to really work on trust. So measuring trust and truth doesn't have to come through a survey. It comes through communication channels naturally. I think decisioning is another signal. You can get this data through really human signals, not surveys, right? So like, are you leader an obstacle? Like, are you the problem? Do you micromanage so hard that your team is paralyzed to move in your absence? Like, you need to work on that. If you are telling me that every decision requires 3 meetings and there's a follow-up meeting, then there's like a, too long, don't read Slack channel. And then it's like, oh, throw another 30 on. Like, are you not? Do you realize how many resources you've wasted getting to decisioning? Like, if your team is afraid to make the wrong call or to make any call, they're not even gonna make any calls. They're just gonna wait. They're gonna freeze and they're gonna wait. And so you as a leader have an opportunity to empower your team, make yourself obsolete. And then I think it's like, what's the vibe?
That's hard. Let me say, because so I say founders are delusional in their ego at first.
Yes.
They also have another superpower that becomes a bit of a weakness. And the other superpower is that as a founder, you actually don't make a lot of data-based decision-making. You make gut-based decision-making because there's no data in the beginning. You don't have enough customers. You don't have enough. Yeah. You're just making gut-based instinct decisions. You are an artist. And you go, I have a vision, and I'm going to paint this picture, and I'm going to make people love it. And then you iterate the picture and so on and so forth. Sure. But because they've got such a visceral, instinctual decision-making process, when people don't make a similar quality of decision, they jump down, they jump in.
Right, it's a judgment. It's a judgment in how someone's doing something. But it's like, did you get the desired result? Like, did it happen?
And that's it. And that's, I mean, it's funny, we're talking about levers earlier. Talking about the number one lever in startups is managers. Managers are so important in a startup, even more so than in a corporate. I say in a corporation, they've professionalized so many parts of a manager's role that if you put someone that's mediocre, they're sort of caught. They're not going to impact too much, right?
Yes.
But in a startup, so much is dependent. Everything HR is the manager, right? So how good the quality of your managers is a direct volatile impact, whether positive or extremely negative.
Huge. Like early on, I was talking about the challenges from going from corporate to startup, and I talked a little bit about copy and paste. But the other thing is leadership accountability. Like in a large organization, like you're saying, ineffective leaders can hide. Like they can hide behind systems and processes. And typically there's succession plans and workforce plans and internal mobility. And so talent management and hiring feels less consequential. Like you've got a backstop, like you're cool, less consequential. And it is like there is such this tolerance for mediocrity that it doesn't make sense to me, right? Because you can be. You don't have to try that hard, honestly.
You can get away with it. If you just do your part, the machine still runs. Nothing's broken. There's nothing wrong. They tell me nothing's broken.
Right. It's but is it great?
Yeah. And that's how the Goliath gets bloated. That's how the Goliath becomes less nimble, right? In ability to change, because you've got all of these cogs in the machine that are just like,
good.
I'm happy.
I'm status quo. I'm okay being mediocre. I'm cool being a C+. But at a startup or at a much smaller, more nimble organization, every single manager matters. Every single hire matters. Every person is consequential. I find that I've taken talent selection way more seriously in the startups and approached it through such a cutthroat lens, which I didn't and likely wouldn't think about doing at a large organization. It doesn't mean you always get it right. People are dynamic, things change so fast, but the process is very deliberate in hiring and in talent and manager training and things. It's about being thoughtful and very deliberate. That is a process or a conversation that I do think is actually really important. In the world where it's just enough, I do think you need to be very deliberate about hiring, being thoughtful about the personas you're going after.
Yeah.
Managing that so tightly. I don't think you have a great margin of error when you're hiring leaders in a startup. You kind of gotta, and when you accept mediocrity at a startup that you might see in a large organization, that's a precedent. You, my friend, have now set a precedent for what you're willing to tolerate. So don't be shocked when 6 to 12 months down the line, you and I are having a conversation about God, I don't know, everyone's just mailing it in. Well, did you expect something different?
Yeah. Yeah.
That precedent is so important in a startup.
Let's talk about that and then managing performance in a startup, because this is always fun. Performance reviews in a startup, career conversations in a startup. I feel like everyone gets them wrong. So because I think they're a bit of a copy paste. I think we get a lot of copy paste in performance management when people are trying to do PIPs or they're trying to, What are your thoughts? I'm very opinionated. I'm going to try to keep my opinion. I think people know my opinion by now. What is your thoughts on how we do performance management as startups and maybe where we get it wrong?
Oh, so I have so many hot takes and I hope they're connected. I can't wait to hear what yours are. So I don't believe in performance improvement plans. I haven't done one in years. I do not believe in them. I do not find them effective at all. They don't measure performance. It's more of a CYA. And there is a need for that for both the employee and the business, but there are ways that you can kind of amicably part ways without a PIP. So it's not a process I will take with me. That is a hot take. So I don't believe.
Yeah. No.
What is your thought?
I'm in agreement. I think performance management should be done regularly in your one-on-ones.
Yes. I build a really robust performance reviews. We're going to do it annually. Here are these beautiful competency models, and here's this 360 feedback, and here's this thing. And it took so long. And because I think our people are so great, they're kind of just really flexible. They're going to do it, but not enough people got benefit from it. And so I said, okay, I hear you. Let's not do that again. That was super distracting, low value.
It takes a lot of time and a lot of resources also away from the problems that our managers and our teams need to be doing.
And they're delayed. So I'm asking you to give me feedback about stuff that happened 6 months ago. I moved on. I've lived 18 lives. A recency biased activity, and it just gets messy. So I've done that.
So one of my thoughts, Ali, is like, there's probably like 5% of the company that actually needs this performance conversation. And most of us are just avoiding a conversation with those people. So then we build out this whole entire robust system to talk to like 5 people that should have been talked to. So like my recommendation is, usually when people come to me like, we want to do performance management, I go, who's the problem? Who's the problem? Just like make a list and let's just talk to those people about what the problem is. And then, you know, but the only argument I've gotten on that I've sort of agreed with that resonates is it is a backstop. It's a backstop for the managers and the people who are not giving feedback. But you should know who your managers are that are not giving adequate feedback.
Right. It shows up in the results. Like, I'm sorry, you don't need a performance review system. You don't need to waste resources and time. Make sure you're giving your team feedback at any point in time. I should be able to talk to any employee and say, do you know how you're doing right now? Like, do you know how you're performing? I should be able to say that at any time to any employee and they should answer me. But this time around, we're trying something where we said, employee, if you want feedback, ask for it. Here's the tool. Here's the framework. You schedule it. You want it.
Because high performers actually want it at times and they're not getting it. And so you've sort of given
to you, employee. Like, ask for it. You want feedback? Ask for it. So we kind of put it on the team. We're trying it. I don't know. We're right in the middle of it. So I don't know how it's going to work. But
I think there's always real power when we democratize something, when we shift the balance of power. And the balance of power here, you're redistributing it to the employee, saying it's in your hands. This is your power. If you want to learn about how you can get better, ask for it, and your manager will then engage. And then that way, it's not this once a year thing where it feels like the whole company stops just to like try and do this one thing. And then HR is spending all their time fighting managers and running after them to go, did you fill it out? You didn't fill it out. You haven't done it. You need to do this. Okay, interesting.
Or it's like you're using ChatGPT and you're like writing feedback. It's like all these things. It's like, no way. But I do think whether you have a performance review or not, you need to be having talent conversations. Like here, we look at talent really on this performance continuum where it's like, it's about achievement, so results and behavior. So you can have somebody who's a high achiever, but an absolute nightmare to work with. That's one kind of, you can have somebody who is like the soul of the organization, but they just aren't contributing. Like those conversations still need to happen. So it's not an excuse to not talk about talent.
Those are the two hardest. Yes,
right? I know.
The asshole that performs or the kind one that is lovable but doesn't perform. You're like, don't want either. No, because they actually both are not meeting the expectations.
Yes.
And I think that's when people say, and it's a precedent, and they attract more people like them, or people go, okay, so I can get away with this.
Right. Like, okay, I can be a huge jerk. And as long as I'm like, checking a box, all is forgiven. So, I don't think you just throw people away. You need to coach. You need to give feedback. You need to be like radically clear and really supportive. Like, I don't think it's just like, whoop, you're out. But
all right, Ali, let's end it with one big question here for you, which is, what's your biggest mistake? What did you copy paste? What did you try? I mean, you told me a little bit about your performance management, how you've shifted from it, but where have you learned a lesson on this one?
There's so many things. I do think the copy and paste of process is pretty catastrophic. And I've done it now a couple times. Like, I do think that is really detrimental. I think it impacts your brand as an HR leader. I think it impacts, a team's ability to believe you understand what's going on in the business. I think that's probably my greatest learning is really the copy and paste of process, which is why I have such a visceral reaction to it today. And I think too, the one thing, it's classic. It's promoting too fast, firing too slow. I've done that. I've seen that. I've kind of watched it happen.
We give away C-suite titles like candy and stuff.
It's so interesting. And even VP titles, which I actually think is worse possibly because that's like reach. That's within reach.
6 VPs. There's like 6 VPs in a startup of 50 people.
Yes. Yes. And employees, like I'm saying, like VPs seem within reach to employees. And that kind of goes back to the precedent, right? It's like, oh, this person was director, senior director, VP in like 6 months. You're like, oh, I can do that too, but you can't. Counter offers, don't do it. I don't believe in them. Like, I am a hard no to a counter offer. I have done it and it has bitten me every single time.
So what do you mean by counter? Let's just get clear on that.
So when someone says, hey, I'm leaving for X, Y, and Z job, you're like, oh my God, no, please don't. We need you. Here's this, whatever it might be. Again, it's precedent, right? It's all these things I'm really saying are precedent. Process in precedent.
Because then
that's where the greatest
just
learnings are.
Start. That's interesting. I think that's when people try copy paste, because like Netflix overpays significantly. And you're like, yeah, but you're not Netflix.
Right. We don't have the cost structure for that. And like, I don't think there's a need. Like, what does the business need to do?
What's interesting is Harvard is known for the opposite. So Harvard underpays their professors, saying that if you want to work here, so they're sort of saying we only want the people that really want to work with us and want the Harvard brand.
Right.
So there's an interesting when you have are you? Yeah. So that, I mean, it's interesting. So Ali, I'm gonna summarize some of the points that you said here, and as I summarize them, I want you to give us the last hot take. So I'm gonna kind of summarize, and then you give us the last hot take. So I got nine really good points I wrote out that I really liked through our conversation. Yeah.
Okay.
One of the first ones you talked about was altitude. So knowing as a startup leader that you've got to be able to work big picture in the morning potentially, and then detailed at night. And so the successful ones are able to shift altitudes really well. Curiosity, you brought that up over and over again. You got to get really curious. What are we actually building here? What do we need to create? Don't try and copy paste. Figure out solutions for the specific problems that are happening at your startups. Yeah. I really like what you said. Learn to listen to the music through the noise. What is the actual music through all that noise? What are we looking for? What is the right metrics for us? Not just the metrics I can copy paste. Clarity, over communicate, clarity. That was the other one.
Important.
You talked about velocity and being 10 steps ahead and really being able to pivot, your ability to change. It's funny. I work with some corporates. We do leadership development. We do leadership development, obviously, across industries and startups and scale-ups primarily. But here and then we do some larger corporates. Corporates always talk about change management, but startups never talk about change management because the reality is your every day is change management. Your every day is a pivot and your ability to actually deal with that change. So I really, really like that. You talk about extreme ownership, that if someone doesn't have extreme ownership, they can extremely get out.
That's true. Yes. Move really fast out the door, please.
Understand organizational health and the pulse of where things are instead of measuring like NPS, employee engagement. Really try and get a pulse of your organizational health. Always have talent conversations. Do not wait and save them for performance reviews. Always have talent conversations regularly and just deal with the problem children versus making everyone, suffer through it. And we talked about just the importance of leaders and managers. That's the most important hires you're making are your managers. So your margin of error for that is so low that you've got to be able to work it through. And then the last one, it says, be careful what you tolerate because that becomes your culture.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So these are some really good takeaways. But Ali, give me the last hot take.
I feel like this might be career limiting to say, but I'm going to say it because I do believe it. I think in startups, it is so easy to think that you have a talent problem. I truly believe that it's not a talent problem. It's a leadership problem. So founders, CPOs, new hires in a startup environment are like, we just need to hire the right people. Yeah, maybe. And you need to build the right environment. Like, that's on you. You need to be clear. You need to be accountable. You need to build the right environment. Like, hiring strategy is not going to save you if the leadership strategy is broken. Like, that is so important. So it's like, it's me. Hi. Like, I'm the problem. Like, it's that. And like, that is so true. But I know that and I try to work on that. And I welcome all the feedback that comes with that. But that I think is going to be my hot take.
That's your hot take. I love it, Ali. That was amazing. That was
Yeah.
awesome. Ali, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing with our unicorn leader audience and everyone that's going to benefit from this. This was lovely, fun conversation. You've got such great energy. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of this.
Thank you for having me.
For the folks listening, you can find our episodes on unicornlabs.ca, but you can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. Ali, where can people find you? Are you on LinkedIn? Are you...
Yeah. Come find me on LinkedIn. I'd love to chat about any of these things.
Fantastic. We'll find Ali on LinkedIn. Thank you, folks. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
And that's all for now.